Welcome to the Sad Song Queens podcast, where we dive deep into the songs that make us cry. I'm Laura Webb.
And I'm Lindsay Wolfington.
Today, we welcome Brian Fennell, and we're going to let him take over the pod and ask me and Laura questions.
It's a little nerve-wracking because we haven't had time to prepare where we usually do. So we'll see what he has in store for us.
Not sure you'll need those tissues today, but let's get into it.
Because you always need a good cry. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, Brian, welcome. At the end of our interview with Brian, who is SYML, he mentioned, I have so many questions for you guys. It kind of sat with us and we were like, well, come on back and ask us questions. So here we are. We get to be in the hot seat today.
Oh my gosh. This is one of my favorite sort of things to be able to do. I'm just naturally a curious person. So if I'm sat next to a pilot or a firefighter at the bar, I'll just not leave them alone. So this is great that I've cornered you on your own podcast to be able to ask you some questions. But thanks for being willing.
You're welcome. Welcome to Career Day, apparently.
Yeah, right. Can I welcome people to the podcast?
Yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, humans around the world, welcome to not my podcast, but award-winning, much accomplished supervisors with a combined 40 years of placing your future favorite sad songs into moving pictures. It's Sad Song Queens. It's Laura Webb. It's Lindsay Wolfington. And I spent many hours coming up with these questions and that introduction. So we're going to get into it. First of all, I have to tell people that these people are responsible for some of my first sync uses in film and TV and also some of my most recent. So technically, we've known each other for many, many years. Laura, you placed my former band Barcelona in the hills, and I had a party for that at my apartment, and it was about 15 seconds of a helicopter flyover in the background, which was very instrumental in my career. But then you placed Where's My Love in Teen Wolf, and my life really took a turn after that. So, and then, of course, Lindsay with One Tree Hill and Virgin River, some really pivotal moments in my musical career.
And Shadowhunters.
And Shadowhunters as well. My gosh, all the vampires.
I forget about it too, but basically, you were Magnus and Alex.
Just fantasy love is how I would describe my music.
Supernatural. Yeah.
Exactly. So some of these questions are about the use of sad music, but a lot of it is like career day questions where I have been doing this for a long time, but I still don't know some things about your jobs. So I wanted to start with a couple of those questions. Namely, when I was looking on through all you guys' extensive credits, there's some different forms of crediting. So there's music supervision, there's clearance, and then that kind of led me to how many roles are sort of under the umbrella of music supervision when it comes to a film? What's the main difference between, is there one person who's just, I clear songs, that's it?
It depends. Very often music supervisors also do music clearance. And as someone who teaches music supervision, think even if you don't do the physical clearance, you need to have a deep understanding of music clearance to be a music supervisor. But every once in a while, there will be a separate person, or a music supervisor will hire a separate music clearance person so they can just focus on the creative and not have to deal with the paperwork and stuff. Even when you don't do paperwork, you're usually still involved in the negotiating, if there's an issue, getting a yes, things like that.
Yeah, and sometimes it depends when we get hired on a project, which we can go into later. Sometimes maybe a director or a producer, they have all the songs that they know, so they just want you to just do the paperwork, which is fine, And we both do clearance, so we're freelance, we got to hustle, we'll do whatever to pay the bills, so...
I mean, and honestly, when One Tree Hill ended, two of my executive producers went and started Awesomeness TV, which was a YouTube channel. And something that was big with YouTube was just people doing covers, right? But since they were a real channel and not just a random person's channel, they had to get music clearance. So I would do music clearance for them. Sometimes it is just about getting the rights, or sometimes you find an indie filmmaker who's I just have to have this one song. Can you help me clear it? And then in terms of other roles, music coordinator is probably the most common other role in music supervision. Sometimes the credit's given and sometimes it's not, but it's often a person who works with a music supervisor and helps them. Sometimes it is helping them do the paperwork and getting wave files and make sure cue sheet information is correct and all that kind of fun stuff. You don't really see the title music assistant that often. I don't know why we skipped over the assistant level, but great for people getting into the career.
I think I technically started as an assistant because when I joined my bosses, there was a coordinator, but I got promoted within 2 months. So,
I mean, you're fast, girl.
So, and then sometimes there is like an assistant music supervisor, and then sometimes that's a way to bump up your coordinator to have them be credited with you in the music supervision role. And then there's within the music department, there's music editors who will cut in the music and the score. Needle drop, source, we call them that, or score. So we have a music editor, we have a composer. And that's generally like the whole music department. And then it depends. Like if there's an on-camera, then you might have an arranger, you might have a executive music.
On-camera music supervisor on occasion.
Yeah.
I also just want to add back to the music clearance question a little bit. Reality shows, when I worked on the Sing Off, which was an a cappella competition show, like there were 2 people who did clearance and I did all like working with the groups about song choice. And so we really split the roles. So, and every type of, right? It's so interesting, right? Like every little version of media has its own take on the music role.
Yeah. My friends who are supervisors, I always envision them as like a little bit like renegades, like kind of coming into the studio or on set, like flicking a cigarette and like being like kind of the badasses of the taste set, because I know, and this is just a little bit jumping ahead in terms of the hot takes, because like the separation between taste and what's best for the project is probably really wild journey in your jobs. But so we'll get into that a little bit later. But like when you're starting out, at what point, are you ever to this point where you have an agent or somebody that represents you to pitch you for projects, or is it all word of mouth, selling yourself in that sense?
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit of both. I think you have to probably have a few things for an agent to take notice. So it's building your career, connecting, trying to get filmmakers to hire you when you're starting out. Like there's some people that don't have agents at all, and a lot of it is your relationships. And I would say most of the jobs I've gotten, or a lot of my jobs, were through relationships, and it's really a relationship business. But our agent, we both have the same agent, Rochelle, and she will definitely help us with saying, like, maybe connecting the dots, right? Like say Netflix reached out to us about something, and then she can go and send our credits or something. And then she's in meetings and she'll bring us up like, oh, I was just sitting down with this studio, I brought you up, So it's a little bit of both, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's always about relationships, but it is kind of nice to have another person, one, either bringing your name up in a room or doing that tough negotiating or going through, they're like 5-page agreements, right? So it's nice to have somebody eyeball that with you while you're confirming your deal.
We got sent an offer letter for something this week, and we're like, oh, no, you guys deal with that. Thanks.
Yeah, right. Well, it's probably a big mental load depending on the scale and the quantity of projects that you have going on at any given time. So to be able to have that buffer of thinking ahead past the next 2 things you have on the calendar, and all while trying to like pay attention to music. Because I imagine the next question is about discovery and about how, because I know I get asked that a lot in interviews, is how am I discovering music? How has it changed over the years? And I just sort of imagine, at least my nightmare scenario, if I was a supervisor, would be getting force-fed or heavily suggested from labels, A&R, management, and artists themselves. And I'm sure you found some like great songs over the years while people essentially like metaphorically handing you a tape or a CD, or through a heavy-handed major label A&R being like, you got to check this new hot thing out. How much do you tune that out / listen to it? Is it your kids that are feeding you stuff? How are we discovering?
I feel like we may be on the brink of my kids introducing me to stuff.
Yeah.
My son.
They do. I think they do.
Yeah, my son's definitely, I actually meant to ask him, there's Kilby Girl, and the band is like Backseat Lovers or something. I'll look this up. I was like, I really like, it reminds me of the Kooks, who I love the Kooks.
Yeah, I think we have built up many relationships. We've been doing this a while. So there's a lot coming at us, right? From labels, publishers, pitching companies, artists, your cousin, whoever, right? And
Right.
Everyone's always like, oh, here. So I think it's become even more challenging, honestly, because there's so much coming at you. Like when we both started, you just got sent CDs from like, I don't know, the couple major labels that existed, maybe a few pitching companies. So it was kind of manageable. And I actually tried to really like stay on top of it. Now I've like given up because it's just so much.
Laura used to be like, I listen to everything. And I was like, that's impossible. And so now she's on this side of the table.
Yeah, I know. Because it's just like, I just like to know, because if someone references something, you're like, oh, okay, that's your taste. Okay, all right, well, I can think of 3 other like that, right? Now it's really hard. I think during COVID, I finally like gave myself the permission to be like, I'm not going to know it all. It's okay. And then I like let myself listen to podcasts and audiobooks where I always felt like I should be listening. And
Right.
there is always that pressure. Lindsay and I work on ExoKitty, and it's predominantly K-pop. So for that, whenever we see a blast come in and it's for K-pop, I'll go and put that in the ExoKitty folder, right? So then you're like, okay, that's for that. So some of that is, okay, this show, I work on Lincoln Lawyer. It's a lot of classic rock, blues.
Clearly segmented.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are always the priority of what you're working on at that moment. You're like, okay, let me grab that. I saw that in my inbox, right? I think the longer you do it, I think when we were first starting out too, I felt like I had to get back to every email, and it's just impossible. And, people reaching out saying, have you listened? Do you have feedback? It's like, if I spent all the time giving feedback, I would never have time to do my day job, right?
Right.
So I've let go of all that, the perfectionism.
Or the wanting to clear the inbox and respond to everything.
Yeah, it's challenging, but you just hope that you get good stuff. Also, we work so closely with labels, publishers, management, pitching companies. So when we're stuck on a scene too, we'll ask them, and we hopefully have built up good relationships so they know our keywords and stuff we like and really cater that. And that's a really great relationship to have. And we're so thankful that we have so many great people that also will help us.
And I would agree. Every once in a while, like I don't go on Spotify to find music. When I'm on Spotify, I'm usually making a mix for a very specific project, or we're making like an inspiration playlist for an original song we have to have written. So like my algorithm is not consistent. And plus then my son is on my family plan. And while he has good taste, it's a lot of Bakar and Michael Jackson, which are awesome, but like just not really what my shows are looking for. As Laura said, like those keywords, like if I'm working on Virgin River, like, and you send me a playlist that says singer-songwriter or a la bands we've used on the show before, that's going to catch my eye. And if it's an electronic dance album and I'm not working on anything that needs electronic dance, I'm not going to listen to that right now. But we definitely still have favorites. So like when you see that like Matt Berninger is coming out with like a new album and he's the lead singer of The National, it's like, ooh, like I've always liked The National, so I'll probably like this new thing from him. So I feel like those things are kind of popping up. And then I love keeping up with mainstream music, and that is something I do with my kids or in the car. Like I still listen to terrestrial radio. I like to know.
You're one of them.
I know, right? I'm one of the 10 listeners of K-Rock and Kiss FM. So I enjoy that stuff. And I just like, it always comes in handy, especially when you're working. Like when we worked on Monster High and needed original songs written like pop songs, it was good to have those like pop culture references for our conversations with the director and things like that.
Yeah.
Some of my discovery, I would say, like I have Sirius and I listen and I try to, I'm more of like electronic indie, like just in my personal taste. So I'll try to like, okay, what's new? Oh, okay, I know this artist, that kind of thing. So I try to do that. But sometimes I'll switch over and be like, what's happening in mainstream world? And also just keeping your ear to the ground, being on social media saying, oh, okay, all these people are mentioning this artist.
I was going to say, yeah, when people post videos of concerts, I think even you, Brian, posted like somebody dancing to one of your songs, and it was like an older song that I hadn't heard in a while. And I was like, wait, what's this one? Right?
And she'll send it to me and be like, oh, it's sad,
Watch out.
This girl, Sobi, I first found because someone posted something on Instagram and her song was in it. And I was like, this is stunning. So like when there's a really like stunning song, it grabs your attention. So that works.
What is your discovery? Because I'm always curious myself too. Like, yeah, where are people figuring it out?
I'm very mainstream. Like people now, especially now that I have this little baby label that I've started. Like I am trying to go back a little bit in time to where it was just what you hear locally, because Seattle is obviously where I'm from, and Seattle is a storied music town. So I've enjoyed really getting to know more of the active local, young and old acts around here. And that's through word of mouth, right? Like it's like you can go check out to see who's playing in town and all that. But Usually the best is like, oh, do you know so-and-so? And sometimes it's like people like y'all or people at one of the DSPs being like, oh, do you know so-and-so? Because they're up in the Northwest too. And it comes via LA or Nashville or whatever. But then I'm like reaching out to this person, and literally somebody that I'm about to work with lives like miles from me and I had no idea. And she's amazing. So trying to go back that way a little bit. That's a little terrestrial radio too, in terms of like the end is my alternative station here from when I was a kid. It's still active.
Is it still independent?
No, but it's still, I think fancies itself somewhat of like a tastemaker alternative station. My friend went to an end session yesterday, which is where they have artists come in and do the lunchtime thing, and you can win tickets. And he's like, yeah, I won tickets. I was like, I feel like maybe only 20 people called, like in total, to get those, because Lindsay, you'd probably be there if you lived there. But
I would have been one of them. Yeah.
Anyway, I listen to pop music a ton in the car.
Well, but so the radio station has acoustic performances at the station during lunch that fans can come to?
Yes.
That's cool. I feel like, so I worked in radio, but like 25 years ago, but I don't feel like we had that.
What kind of station?
It was modern rock, but it was kind of like an alternative, like put a little Ben Lee in there or Beth Orton. Like we dabbled in cool indies.
I have been to countless pizza or like at the local brewery type thing. So they're like, here's SYML here to play 3 songs for you.
Smile.
Yeah, he's great. Okay, here's a medium hot take. What is your opinion about stink bands or artists that were formed or pitched to you as like a real sounding and seeming band in the hopes that it would increase their chance of getting placed?
By the way, I thought you said stink band, and I was like,
in a way, they sort of are.
Oh, we know your opinion. I'm just kidding.
No.
Well, behind the question, are you saying that people are forming bands just to get synced or have side sync projects?
No, not side sync projects. Definitely like have marketed themselves as a seemingly real, like it changed. I feel like this started happening maybe 10 years ago. People would sort of form and it would be like, oh, I like this artist. And they're actually like not an actual artist. They're just like a producer and a singer who sound very commercially successful. And they are, if they get these ads or these placements or whatever. Are you seeing that still, or is that maybe am I like behind the times?
No, I think there still is that. And I think for our purposes, if a song works, the song works, right? And sometimes the less we know, the better. Like sometimes I don't look up who it is because I'm trying to get it to work for the purposes of our scene or the moment. So if it works, right? Like sometimes you can tell stuff was purposely written, very like copy paste print, right? I think there are some people that have side projects, or we do these songwriting camps, or there are writing camps where they write something for us and maybe they don't want to release it under their name, right? So sometimes we're like, no, but the fans are going to love this moment. You should release it. Maybe just release it under a different name kind of thing. One artist was like, oh, I'm not going to release this because it's not under their artist moniker, right? But it's still a good song. So the songs that sound like everything else, right? Like maybe we wouldn't use them more than like I have an opinion about, oh, this, because we don't need them to tour. I mean, it's great. We love to like go and see you in person and see a show, and you're artist driven, right? But it's okay.
I think also I'm kind of 2 thoughts, right? My first thing is like with these songs, we had 2 songs placed in this movie. One that was written by an artist, didn't fit their artist profile, so they're just not releasing it. And I've placed this song twice, and I think it's gorgeous. So I'm like, okay, just make up a name and put it out there. It's a great song. The second song, same situation, but the artist said, okay, I'll just release it under a different name. In literally like 48 hours, made that decision and is going to put it out. And I think that's great because it's a little bit like, unfortunately, I don't think we live in a huge album culture. I think there's room for album culture. I like encourage that and hope it's coming back. But a fun song is a fun song. And if it's being put in a project, then it's being released to the world in one way. So if someone wants to go stream it or put it on a playlist that belongs to all the other songs in this movie, like, why not? And I don't release music, so I don't know what the balance of like how much it takes to put a song out versus like the 7 cents you're going to make for every stream or whatever. But sometimes I'm like, just put it out there. Like it was good enough to be put in this movie. That means like 5 people liked it, right? Like the editor, the producer, the music editor, the supervisor, like, enough people liked it that maybe even more people will like it. And then I come from, One Tree Hill, like I had a showrunner, like, and we definitely used library tracks or tracks that weren't by bands, but with a certain character, like our character Peyton was like a music lover. So basically if she was listening to it, did have to be a real band, and my showrunner would be like, who is this? Like when I pitched the song, there would be a like, okay, who are they? And are they, like it was more exciting if they were an indie band from Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, right? So I see both sides of it. So there is I think it's good for artists to know that sometimes supervisor are asked like, okay, who is this and what's their story?
Well, this is a great segue to this question, because as an artist who has been synced or, really worked hard to be synced in the past and tried to create music in beautiful moments, whether they're sad or whatever, to fit future things, how often would you say that the big moments, whether it's like the visual, like the kind of the key moment in a scene or an episode or a film where you're like, this is going to be it. This is the big moment. If I'm an artist, I'm stoked because this might change my life. Because that ties to like how much you really want to be attached to it, right? Like if it's just a background song and it's, dialogues over it, no one's going to be Shazamming it and like digging through the credits to find what this artist is. Or it's like what happened to me in Teen Wolf or whatever, where like people were like, need to have this. I don't care who it is. Cause I like literally that was me in my living room, like just not trying to tour and not trying to be known. And then people were like, nope, we need the song now. So do you think it's more often than not that the big moment turns out to actually be a big moment for the artist? And is it in those magical moments, is the magic like more surprising or orchestrated? When it happens, you like knew it, like really tried to be careful and meticulous in making this a big moment, or you're like, didn't see that coming in terms of like what the external outside of the project effect was for an artist around a song?
I kind of call it like the goosebump test, right? If you feel moved and if we all the team and we're working on it, and like we have these spotting sessions where we all watch the episode or the film together and we all are giving notes, like on the composers giving notes, our showrunner or our director, the music editor, all that. And sometimes when people stop and go like, oh, that's really good. I think then you're like, okay, maybe we have something here, right? Because we are trying to get emotion, right? So I think if we all feel it, we hope so. I think we have seen historically a couple gets together, montages, the beginning of episodes, the end of episodes. Those are like prime real estate or bigger moments, right? But there's always those surprises where you're like, oh, I would have not this song. I thought this one would have been. Like with Ash's moral of the story and To All the Boys, like she's lip syncing it. We hoped. We had no idea it would explode the way it did. I really liked your song for our 2 characters, and Lydia and Styles, and those were fan favorites. So I remember where I was when I heard the song. I was actually visiting a friend in Brazil, and I was working, and like I was looking out at the beach. I was like, this is so pretty. And my friend even was like, what's this song? This is beautiful. And and then the editor was like, this is perfect. So I just remember where I was. So I don't know, you always hope, but you never know.
To that, I think, especially in television, but definitely in movies, right? Like if it's in a scene that's a really important scene to the character that the audience loves, to Laura's point, like the Ash song, we knew that was a big moment. Like when the lead actress breaks up with her boyfriend and then lip syncs a breakup song into the camera, we were like, we got to nail this. Like this is a moment, right? You kind of like, I think our job is to look for moments.
Yeah.
And some moments take off more than others. Obviously in a movie, there's like fewer moments, whereas in a TV series, there are more moments. On One Tree Hill, I was just on like the Drama Queens podcast recently, and one of the actresses sang a song, and she was in like everybody's favorite couple, like Haley and Nathan. People loved them. So like when Haley went and recorded a song about her relationship with Nathan, that yes, like we picked for her and whatnot, but like we put it on our soundtrack, and I think Maverick was our label, and they were a little bit like, who is this person? Like, why are we leading with like, or why is the song that's being played the night the album's coming out this one? And we were like, because it's Haley. Like people are invested, right? It's kind of like when you're already SYML and SYML puts out a new song, people are like, ooh, like what's the new SYML song, right? Like they're already invested in you, but like when you're a new artist, you really need to make an impression because people don't know who you are yet and they don't know like your song yet. And that's where like if you're a new artist and you're tied to characters that people already care about, I think that's like where you see an impact.
When you are in the room and you're looking for the goosebumps, and you say maybe it's like 5 people, right? It's like it's kind of the definition of like trying to pare down the cooks in the kitchen so that those moments are more clear and there's less noise and distraction. How much and was it hard when you were starting out to separate your opinion from what was maybe clashing in the room with somebody else, and then also what's best for the project? Because like your taste actually might conflict with your opinion when it comes to the song, right? And then that also might conflict with somebody else's opinion about what's best for the moment as well. And so is it a kind of situation where the more experience you have, the more you can read the room and anticipate going in because you have the relationships? Is it an often occurrence that there's a big conflict in the room with those bigger moments?
I would say not. It's not often that there's a big conflict. I do think, right, every scenario is different because the dynamic's different on every project, right? There were definitely times on One Tree Hill where my showrunner put in like Motley Crue or Boston. And I was like, we are making a show for 14-year-old girls. What? And I'd be like, I don't really like this. And I'm not sure our audience is going to like it. And I would just get, you know what? I just really love it. And I'm like, oh, fair enough. Like, it's your name on the end of the show. Like, you guys are the bosses, right? So,
yeah.
And I also feel like that response to my protest was like, oh, well, I can't argue with that, right? Like, and that's fine, right? And when you have your own show, like, sometimes you get to put in a song just because you like it, right? When I was younger, I definitely would feel like really intensely about it sometimes. Like, I remember at one point for our soundtrack, there was like, you can only include like 12 or 13 tracks, right? So we were deciding between like a big name or like this indie artist that was in a really important scene for our characters. And we were going to put the big name artist on there. And I was a little bit like, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Like, we built ourselves on indie music, and yeah, they need to market the album. Like, and that's what we did. And it wasn't a big deal. And we still had an important indie song on there. So I don't know maybe that was when we were like, can we make it 13 tracks instead of 12? And they were like, sure. But yeah, I feel like, this film worth the wait. Like, they called us because they were like, you're the rom-com ladies. Like, we've watched all these rom-coms and you guys do a great job with movies. And it was like, great. And we like knew exactly what to do. And that's why we were there. So our opinion was important. So I don't know, Laura, what would you add to that?
You know, the wiser you get, hopefully, in your years of doing this, you know how to politically play the game a little. Well, I don't know if it's like the game, but you know how to play it more. I would say yes. In my 20s, I was told, oh, you care too much, which I was like, that's not a bad thing. But now I'm like, it's okay. Like, yes, you have your opinion about what works, but ultimately everybody does need to decide. And sometimes your opinion is asked and sometimes it's not, because we are helping them drive and tell the story, right? And they wrote it and it's their project. So we're here to help you tell the story that you want to tell, and we are instruments in that. But, you know, when you get the song that you do, it is that like silent victory, like, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, back to your impression of like the music supervisor being this like chain smoking renegade, and I'm like, oh, it's not that sexy. Back to like music clearance and like
I know
other people's opinions. Like, I mean,
No, and like us showing up to set, basically, when we do go to set, and it's been a lot less like during COVID and stuff, like we don't know anyone. Nobody knows us. I don't know. Music's sort of the last thing on. So sometimes we get forgotten about.
Yeah. Unless it's a project like Daisy Jones where like Frankie Pine like steered the ship.
Right.
Yeah. We often get not invited to premieres because they're like, oh, right, music. Oh,
that's crazy.
Because like we weren't on set, right? Like everybody on set builds this communal, and we're kind of like the stepchild.
Post-production.
Yeah,
that's
post-production.
Actually, yeah. I'm not gonna go into this like I kind of said I would, Lindsay, but with the hope of unionization, like that kind of plays into that. Is like, oh, they're not really part of the party, which is crazy, and why I think it's the renegade badass part, because music is such, and obviously we're biased on this side of the aisle in terms of creative industry, but like music is such, like, you're you're a coolness barometer, like you're like this dynamic sort of wizard when it comes to telling a story. When I mean, this is literally like music. You can. It's not every show and it's not every movie, right? But like the ones where it literally changes people's lives. That's like a good indication that music. And we're just going to jump right to the hot takes. Here we go. Can music save a weaker scene, or make a production bigger than it really deserves to be?
Yes.
I think so too.
And I don't think deserves to be is necessarily the right
terminology,
right?
Yeah, or then it would be otherwise. Like, yeah. Anyway, yeah. This is where I'm like, oh, I wish they named names in terms of because I mean, I've watched stuff before where I'm like, this show is good, but this moment with this song was like unforgettable. Like, I don't remember the rest of the show, but I remember this episode of this whatever. I imagine sometimes in those sessions where you're like, oh, this writing or this acting is not that compelling, but you put a song behind it and it just suddenly really saves it. Like it must be hard when you're watching something with no music, trying to really figure out what's right for the scene. And maybe they're like, hey, this Boston song is going to really take this over the edge. But yeah, I imagine that dynamic to be crazy when it's not the strongest scene and you're like, all right, we got to really dig deep to salvage it.
Well, like I will say, like sometimes we keep pitching and we're like, what is going on? Why is nothing landing right? And then sometimes they tell us ahead of time and sometimes not, but they're like, oh, look, the problem is that the scene didn't work when we shot it. Or, this performance or things like that. Can you help us? This is what we're really trying to go for. And you're like, oh, okay. We were wondering why this was taking so many rounds of things. So that's definitely conveyed to us. And then definitely we've been at maybe when we get to meet like the writers, because we don't always meet all the, like on TV, we don't always meet all the staff writers and they're like, oh my gosh, that scene, you just made it, you amped it up 2 more notches or whatever. And we're like, oh great, well it was a great scene already, and they're like, no, that one was a challenging one or something. So I mean, we definitely do hear that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, also chemistry between 2 actors is better on some shows and not as much on others. Or like, sometimes I can't even tell, but they'll be like, whoever was on set thought there was no chemistry. So you're like, okay. So I've definitely worked on shows where they're like, when these 2 are together, we always want a song. It definitely helps their chemistry. I think we've all like seen the things online where you put, like Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel over the Shining trailer or whatever it is, right? Like where music can totally change the tone. I think that's just it like is a thing. Like music is like everybody's first language and it elicits a visceral reaction. Like even interestingly, doing the podcast, like we focus a lot on lyrics, but I've had friends be like, oh, I've never thought about the lyrics before, right? And they obviously apply. Sometimes the reason a song works is because the lyrics are like exactly what's happening in the scene. And those moments I'm always like, oh my God, how'd we find that? Because first I'm always thinking about the vibe. And does that match the emotion you're trying to elicit? I mean, we've been hired because the person helping sell the movie is like, oh, if you amp up your music, it helps me sell the film. And we've been brought in right at the last minute to like redo things because music needs to be better or needs to be a different tone.
Is that rare?
Well, that's how we were brought on to All the Boys. They had already they temped the film, which is they just put in music, not thinking about budget, anything like that. And then they called us and they're like, you have 6 weeks to replace all the music and here's your budget, which was pretty minimal.
Yeah.
And so the movie was already shot. Yeah, it depends when you get brought in. Like sometimes there's that come in to save the day. And sometimes you're brought in, as soon as the scripts are written and you can really like marinate and think about tone overall. Because I know after like when we did To All the Boys, the first one, we did it really quickly and then it took 8 months before it came out. And then when we were watching it back and everyone commenting, we're like, oh, right, it did have this sort of like retro 80s synthy thing. And that we didn't even really think about it because we were just doing it so quick. But we're like, oh, it did have this whole like
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We patted ourselves on the back after the fact.
Yeah. So budgets on my side, it's usually like, oh yeah, they got no money. It's like, but then I'm like, well, Boston probably got paid a little bit for their usage. would you say that usually budgets are spent wisely on music, or is it just like continuously you have to go to these people and say, look, this is what we have? I know there's some negotiation that always happens, but like, how much of a pain in your ass is the budgets on the projects that you work on?
Sometimes it's the most important.
I mean,
Yeah.
it definitely steers where you go. We know there's so much great indie music out there that we love to work with. So sometimes,
We don't see it as that challenge. We are like, you get to have really cool stuff that no one's heard. So
right.
it's a plus.
And I worked on this show Tagged, which had literally no money, but it was basically, so I went to like 5 companies and was like, send me your artists who are okay within this price range, and we'll just try to we'll try to make up in quantity what we can't in quality. And that show was really like dark and weird, and that's what was really fun about it. So like, I felt like we got to use songs that wouldn't be licensed normally anyway. So while we didn't have a ton of money, we were able to have this super stylized soundtrack. That sometimes that's easier and harder, right? Like when you have no money, it's like, here's your sandbox, play in it. And then when you have huge budgets, that's a big sandbox. So then it's like,
Yeah.
so then people might come back and be like, no, more ideas, because they know things aren't limited. We've never been on the unlimited budget project, so call us. I mean, I think. But it's interesting, like One Tree Hill, like in retrospect, had a decent budget. But at the time, and just because we used like 10 songs an episode, it went fast. And I was always negotiating within $1,000 of our budget. I think what we always try to do is to be fair, so that like when you have that indie project and you know there's no room to budge, like people believe you. And then when you have room to budge, you budge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we remember who was cool, and who really worked with us, and we try to
Yeah.
go back to those companies who make our lives easier, right?
Yeah.
And the artists that were like, oh, you know what? They were super cool on this indie film. Oh, I have a little bit more on this TV show. I'm going to do a more healthy quote. Yeah, sometimes like there's expensive songs written in. So then you have to kind of reverse engineer and be like, okay, well, this spot. Yeah, I mean, I really do kind of look at it like real estate, right? Like, okay, this is the ocean front. This is what the showrunners want. Okay. So in this bar, we're not going to spend as much here, right?
Yeah.
Because it's more buried. It's not as prominent. That's
Yeah.
kind of how we're looking at it when we're reading the script, watching the cuts, and just kind of, grids. It's not as sexy as people think, but you got to know your grids. Yeah, you got to love some spreadsheets, organization. It's right brain, left brain job. So
Doesn't that sound sexy?
That's not the cigarette side.
no.
From my perspective, the budget side is always like, I remember when I was younger being like, I think we got $500, right? Classically from MTV, that Hills use. And I mean, at the time we're like, that's a lot of gas for our band. And also like thinking like, this is really going to change our lives because people are going to see it and see our little name at the bottom of the Hills.
All right, that Chiron, you can't like pay for that.
Yeah. It's always going to be the things that are like somewhere on the lower end of what you think you're worth that will end up being more impactful. At least that's my experience, is like, that's when the whole team comes into play of like relationships that you trust and trust you to say like, hey, can you work with me here because I think this is important. And then it's always the higher ticket items, opportunities that just get buried. And you're like, how did you spend this much on this moment? That is wild. So that's always me. I'm like, who's making these decisions? Like, it's like a toddler back here being like, I like that one for, this bar scene.
When your song was placed in the Hills, and also I was the coordinator on the Hills. It was John Ernst who was the supervisor, just like to give the flowers to the appropriate people.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Did you see growth? And did you see, I mean, like, because they would rerun those shows so often.
Absolutely.
Did you see royalties? Like,
when I speak, yeah, in whatever opportunities that I'm invited to speak about that kind of stuff, it's always, like it was $500 on the tip, but like this is a around the world show, like it kept on getting played. Vampire Diaries is the same way. All these shows that you guys have been involved in over the years that have been really like impactful, not because of the first price tag, but because of all the syndication and royalties attached to it as well. So yeah, but that's also like it kind of ties into another question I had about your opinions about studios who don't want to license and they want to buy, which is, they just want to buy it outright. And that, at least from my perspective, is not always great, right? Like, unless it's some like crazy money, which it rarely is for an artist like me, it's more like, well, I really want you to license it. Are you ever caught in a rock and a hard place? Is that what's your hot take on studios owning instead of licensing?
Well, I would say this is mainly applicable to things that are written for the show.
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes. It's like bespoke, like in writing camps, right? Where this is happening with Disney. This is happening with a couple other, like Fox, I think. And they're like kind of Rick Rubening in the back of the room. And they're something off the cuff that these, starving artists essentially are just trying to be like, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And I'll knit you this nice garment. And then they're like, and also like, I want some writer, I want some of the publishing because of that. And also we're going to buy this if we take it. So you're kind of at the mercy of the artist of being like, well, I want to make this good for you. But also if you're not going to use it, I'm not going to make it overly specific to your thing. So I can't like go sell this or license this somewhere else. So it's a little bit of at least from an artist standpoint, it's a little bit of a tricky situation to be in. And I'm wondering if it's ever tricky for you all.
I think it is. We understand the nature of it. And I do, like, often the argument is if you're writing something that is inspired by our IP, then the origin of it is my IP and I should own it. I'm the studio talking, right?
Yeah.
But to our earlier thing of like, we'll put it out into the world, I feel like the studio should be prepared to do something with the track too.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that makes it weirder for you or less weird for you.
Less weird, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I feel like it's kind of like dumb to like own something and then it doesn't exist
Not doing
anywhere.
anything, yeah.
But I think we understand that if you're going to do that, you have to pay a certain amount. And if you can't pay a certain amount, then that's a negotiating factor.
Yeah, I mean, I think like theme songs, okay, that's their IP and they want it. And that's what we're reaching out for. In that case, yes. Or if it's like a character is performing it on camera, yeah, that makes sense because what if the neo-Nazis want to license it for, I don't know, right? Like, so that you could have, and there's that argument too, like, so that you can control.
Wait, what about neo-Nazis? What just
No,
happened?
like, okay, like, let's say that this song.
That's actually that's a great tangent into my next question.
Say that Peyton performed a song and they're like, want to license it for their next rally or something. I don't know, and the studio can be like, no, versus maybe the artist is like, man, I got to pay my rent this month. Okay, fine. You have $5,000? Sure. That kind of thing. Then sure. I don't know.
I feel like we went to a dark place.
This is great.
I gotta have sad,
Whenever I was starting out, people were like, is there anything that you would say no to in terms of your songs being in a liquor commercial or whatever? And at the time I was like, please ask me to be in a liquor commercial or like, just like whatever it is, like we're not getting any asks. So like anything would be great. But I've had to say no now at this point in my job to certain religious things that I've wanted to, stuff that I like kind of flat out disagree with or have a conflict with. And then, so how often is that for you when you have like a really sultry whatever scene or like a neo-Nazi thing and they want to license this or whatever? Like how often are people saying no because of moral conflict of interest?
I think not as often.
But probably because of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, it depends, right? And so I think first you start with if it is a controversial scene, I think you warn the producers, your producers or whoever, just be like, look, this could be a difficult spot to clear, just, given the nature of it. When we go to request it, you should be very explicit of how it's used so that we're not trying to pull the wool over the artist's eyes because that's never our intention, but just so that and we're there to answer more questions. If they're like, hold on, what's the context? Can we see the script pages? That kind of thing. Not too often. I've had an artist deny, and the scene was I felt kind of chaste, but they thought it was too racy. And we later found out maybe the artist had a sex addiction or something. So it just was like more their personal stuff. And I would say more we get denials sometimes on like the first season of a show because they have nothing to point to, right? Like they just don't know what it is, so they can't even picture it.
Yeah, that happened on the Royals. People were like, well, what is what is this? And like, I don't want to piss off the royal family, or maybe they dislike the royal family and they thought that's what it was about.
Yeah. So I think that sometimes, but you can sometimes turn things around by like a passionate letter and just explain more context.
I feel like it happens probably a little bit more on like ads.
Advertising, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think like, right, like when you're really like associated, you have to think about being associated with a brand.
Yeah, because I do remember I was on a panel with Michelle Johnson, who works on The Boys for Amazon, and there's some kind of crazy stuff that happens, and oh my goodness, yeah. And so they're like, even those scene descriptions, people are like, what? I don't want to totally speak on her behalf, but you have to do some explaining. But I think now that there's something to point, and it's all done in jest, you know. But some artists, like, that's why we come to you for approvals, because you should have that say.
I did have one scene that was someone was smoking pot, having sex topless, and getting murdered all in one on Fear Street. And it was like, and it had to be from, you know, a certain time period. And that was challenging.
I remember like early SYML days, it was like a lot of like kind of death and self-harm even. I remember like my label and team being like, I feel like we're maybe doing too much of that stuff. And it's hard, right? Because like sad music, full circle, usually is used in really hard moments, like with loss and mental health and all these things. And so I think it is a bit of a responsibility on the creator's standpoint to not be manipulative or gratuitous in any sense of exploiting those sensitive subjects. Have you ever had to walk off a project because because of relational differences or somebody mistreated you? I'm sure in this industry, and especially as women in this industry, there have been moments where you're like, I got to pay my bills, but these people are assholes. So have you ever walked off because you're like, I don't need to deal with this?
I should have. And as I get older, I now realize, I don't think, especially as women, I don't think we're taught no very much. In this job, we're not really supposed to say no too much because we're service, right? But I should have. But it was like, I didn't want to leave people in a lurch, and I liked everybody else. But I'm now knowing that I have that. If I need to, I want to advocate for myself more. And I hope, I would have told younger me, like, you could just walk away too, you know, but I haven't quit anything yet.
I've definitely been on tough shows and worked with tough people, but I don't, it was interesting. It was like, there was an end date in sight. And I wasn't being harmed. It was just tough. And I think that's the entertainment industry. Sometimes you got to work with tough personalities.
But also, honestly, and I think that's how Lindsay and I, we started to share an office. We were friends. Having good people in your life, like outside of the work, but also, Lindsay and I are outside friends and inside work friends, but that we can like send each other memes and just like vent to each other, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Memes is a form of therapy, people.
Absolutely.
We are big fans of what's it called? Pebbling, like where the penguins like send little pebbles. We'll text each other, be like, oh, I'm on fire today on Instagram. I just sent you 5 funny memes. Or Lindsay's like, you didn't respond yet. Or GIFs or having that is really helpful because sometimes we're not curing cancer sometimes, but it can get intense. So just reminding, taking a step, having a minute to just laugh and be like, and that's what Lindsay's really good at. Like if I'm like, oh, like, I can't believe I said that. Lindsay's like, okay, but in the grand scheme of things,
Totally.
Or when Lindsay's the one amped up, I'm like, okay, calm down.
You really crossed a boundary if I get fired up.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I just want to say for like anyone wanting to be a supervisor too, like you're gonna deal with big personalities at some point, whether it is an artist, a manager, a showrunner, a writer, director, or a label person. Like some of these clearance people are easier than others, and it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
But you also have to be able to like roll with it. Like making a TV or film it's stressful. Right there, deadlines on when you're on set. Like if you go over a certain number of hours, they need to start paying people overtime. Like same thing in post production. Like there is a mix stage, then you need everything done by then. So like there are deadlines that do put pressure on you, and hopefully you work with people who are really good at managing that stuff. Like, and I think we're fortunate enough to have some like great people we work with. And yes, like we're at a stage in our career where it's like, I just want to work with nice people. There's always times where you're not going to love everybody, and that's just like part of it.
That's life. Well, thank you so much for entertaining these questions. I know that like it's a bit of a mysterious career and also badass.
Yeah.
So thank you for entertaining.
Well, I'll go
and
get my
having me.
cigarettes and jean jacket and
Yeah, I know.
go have a smoke. No.
Well, it's the
Good.
best part that we get to see your growth, and then we get to see like we've developed a real friendship, and it's really gratifying, and that's the best part of the job.
Awesome.
And I think we're grateful that you are curious and have questions. So thanks for taking it. Was fun. It's like, what's the artist perspective on this? What did you, as an artist who's also had sync success, it's fun to know what your questions were.
Yeah, what have you denied?
Oh my gosh. Well, there was one from this like particularly massive like mega church that wanted to use My Son Girl. And that song to me is just like too sacred. And I was like, absolutely not. Because it was going to be used in this manipulative way, or at least my opinion. And so I was like, I got to say no. What we actually ended up doing is like we came back after we said no and said, okay, basically for this FU money, we'll do it. Because we'll just turn around and donate it to something that you preach against. And they did not bite on that figure. So it's still a trick I would use. But I think that the coolest thing about what I've learned in this hour was like your sense of self and your identity in a room, any given room that you find yourself in, like hopefully it comes to a place where you can say like no and yes to things confidently, believing in not only your taste and your sense of what wants to be shared with the world musically, but also like personally, and how it's not, I mean, just how you speak is like you're speaking to like the next generation of people who might want to do this as a job. It's such an important job, like not only for the people who work so hard to create the visuals, but like for the artists like me who create music in a cinematic sense. And that there's room for you. Like that's what I always try to tell people, and it really does seem that that's your sense too. So I'm grateful for both of you, and thanks for making time.
We're thankful for you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Thank you for joining us today on Sad Song Queens, because you always need a good cry.
Thank you so much to Brian Fennell for hanging out with us today, and our producer Emily Cartham, and editor Stephanie Gangle.
Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the podcast if you like what we're doing.
Our outro music is by Wyatt Rouse.